Armondo Blount has flipped from Miami to Florida State. Let's talk about it.
You are Locked On Seminoles, your daily podcast on the Florida State Seminoles, part of the Locked On Podcast Network. Your team every day.
Welcome into a bonus episode of Locked On Seminoles. And to be honest, I thought they had a chance to get Armondo Blount in the long term, but this one caught me off guard. Yes, Armondo Blount, defensive end, Miami Central, class of 24 now. I'll discuss that in a moment, has flipped from Miami to Florida State. He announced it yesterday on his Instagram. Before I did this, I wanted to kind of get a holistic view and put the podcast together. Here's the deal. This is one of the rare players that every program needs if they're going to, quote unquote, ascend to the top of college football. Armondo is a special player. He is a special young man off the field. He's an elite student. And quite frankly, he's about as versatile as it gets. It is a challenge for me, even though I have evaluated players for as long as I can remember, to try to figure out what one spot he will play, because like Bruce Smith and a lot of the other great players that came along that inspired me to get into this business, he's very versatile to the point where I don't think he has one spot. He's just a football player. So let's talk about it overall. 6'3", 250, 255, twitchy, changes direction, heavy hands, power at the point of attack. He goes power to speed and speed to power, depending on the move that he wants to go with on any given play. Generally lines up as the right defensive end for Miami Central, but they'll move him around. Playing with Randy Adarica, the other defensive lineman who the Noles would probably like to add as well. That's a kid you need to know that name, Randy Adarica, really good football player. Also at Miami Central. This is the kind of kid that can come in, even though, again, he reclassified. Just to be specific, he's a junior, but he's reclassifying because he's so academically advanced. And Armondo will be class of 24. This is a kid that can come in, even though he's a D lineman, which you don't normally see this, and at least have some type of impact at Florida State next year. Now, I'm not projecting any kind of craziness like, oh, well, he's going to walk into Florida State, enroll a year early and start. That's ridiculous. Florida State has plenty of players. But don't think that Armondo, with his talent, his physical attributes, and his mental capacity all wrapped into one big fancy box for Mike Norvell, Odell Higgins, and the entire Florida State staff. Yeah, he's going to play. He's going to find a way on the field, even if it's 3rd and 6 situations. And that's fine. But I want to talk about one other thing first before we go into the whole Florida State playing time and all that. You got a guy away from Miami, and that's your main rival. And you got it out of arguably the second most important program to Mario Cristobal and the Canes. He went to Miami Columbus, so I'm going to assume that's always going to be the most important. That's his high school alma mater. But Miami Central, Miami Northwestern, those are the two programs that historically the Canes and the Noles have battled the most. Killian and Carroll City, there's several others as well. But that's a great win for Florida State. And if, quite honestly, I don't think they could really have dialed it up any better. Miami needs defensive linemen in this class. So does Florida State. You take one away from them that they'd already received a commitment from. That's pretty unique. So what do I think of him as a player? What does he bring to Florida State? I talked about the attributes. Number one, it's just effort. He's a kid that when he goes, I'm doing X, this move, that move, whatever it is, it's too much athleticism for teams, and his speed and his mentality really give offensive lineman at the high school level just fits. The game I saw him play this year, he had 6 sacks, and I had literally stopped watching him about halfway through the game, and they were playing Vanguard. It's a team in Ocala that's got all kinds of talent. Quarterback was running around making plays and whatnot, and very mobile kid, going to play defensive back at USF, and he still tracked him down several times. Now, the Vanguard offensive line struggled that night with Randy and with this big fella too. But if you really, really look at it, I don't think Blount is a kid that any high school line is going to block consistently one-on-one. And they put their left tackle out there on one-on-one way too often. I didn't understand that. But he kept making those plays. So Miami loses out on a kid like this. Florida State gets one. Roster impact. I will go back into that here. This is, again, I don't like to talk about freshmen making impacts and getting fans crazy about it, but he's a 5-star for a reason. He's got all the rare attributes, man, the length and the speed and the power. I think that Florida State will bring him along a little slower than they would some freshmen that are 5 stars because he's a year younger. 1 year for a teenage boy is a big deal, but he's a grown man too. So I'm curious to see how this will work. I don't have any experience with this because I don't remember a 5-star D lineman that I've covered making this kind of transition with all the skills on and off the field that Armondo Blount does. Again, he's an elite student. This is a kid that will adapt to college quicker than most kids that try to move up, if you will, in a class, because most kids just do it because they want to play football. This is a kid that will be just fine at Florida State academically and do all the right things. So I'm guessing they're going to use him in packages on the edge. Long term, this is a totally different conversation. Notice that I mentioned Bruce Smith earlier. He's one of my all-time favorite players. He's the all-time sack leader in the NFL for a reason. Bruce could play inside or out. He could use speed to power, power to speed, etc. Their body types are not all that different. And I like the effort that Armondo uses when he's pass rushing. It's just a natural fit for Florida State to use him short-term on the edge. But long-term, I think FSU is going to use him in a situation where, you know what? Let's put him in front of a guard in a shade technique, inside, outside, whatever. They might even put him at 1 tech on 3rd and 9, make a center and a guard, try to figure it out. Those are things I could see Armondo Blount doing as a sophomore. I've seen him in practices. I've seen him games, etc. That same burst off the ball is always there, and you can't teach Armondo Blount's ability to get upfield and create havoc. You just can't teach it. You can give some technical advice, but this is a different deal. Real quick, Florida State is, depending on which network you want to go with, top 5 class now because you add a 5-star. I believe Rivals has them number 3. Florida State's got a chance here to kind of get back to that old school, we're going to be a top 10 recruiting team every year kind of deal, and maybe top 5. But winning South Florida, I've talked about this, and I've got, if you look for it on the YouTube page or on Spotify, whatever, it's back a little ways, but Florida State is winning battles in South Florida now. If Florida State's going to get to that Bobby Bowden era kind of winning, there's no shortcut here. They have to win in Atlanta to a certain degree, but more importantly, it's South Florida. Those are the 2 cities they've always hit a kid here or there, but South Florida in particular is important because you're taking kids away from Miami and to a certain degree Florida too. So kind of keep that in mind. I'm going to do a little more on the overall recruiting class next week. If I can get to it, I'll do something this week, but kind of a big box picture, just my open thoughts and discuss it. But just know, like Florida State, the commitment with Armondo Blount, this is huge for the program. And I don't think anybody can discount him playing next year, even though he moved up a class. Armondo Blount is a special player for a reason. Thank you very much, everybody. Please hit that like button, that subscribe, and hit that notification bell. I am going to be back with a normal podcast, if you will, on Tuesday, breaking down some things coming up for Florida State in their next game. Take care.